Hi, I'm Shashank Bhargava, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. In this episode, we talk about how cricket could finally be included in the Olympics and what it would mean for the sport. We also talk about an experimental school in Maharashtra that has helped kids from remote villages. But first, we talk about the G20 Summit that is scheduled to take place over this weekend in New Delhi. Top leaders from 19 countries and the European Union will be arriving in the capital to attend the G20 Summit, which aims to address issues related to the global economy and financial stability. But this time, one leader's absence will be particularly noteworthy. That of Chinese President Xi Jinping, who, alongside Russian President Vladimir Putin, will not be attending the meet. And what's important is that Xi Jinping's absence comes at a time when the Russia-Ukraine war and the India-China border standoff are still going on. We are now joined by Indian Express's diplomatic editor Shubhajit Roy to discuss this development. Shubhajit, begin by telling us what kind of message does Xi Jinping's absence send to the G20 and particularly India?
Well, you see, Chinese President Xi Jinping, by deciding that he's not going to attend the G20 summit in Delhi for the weekend on September 9th and 10th, has, in a way, is going to be the most conspicuous and telling absence from the summit. Xi has been China's president for a decade now, and this is the second time that he's going to miss the G20 summit. Last time he skipped it was in 2021. When COVID pandemic was still at its peak, and the Chinese government's hard zero COVID policy had prevented him from going overseas. In fact, he had not traveled during the pandemic at all. But last time in Bali, when the G20 summit took place in November 2022, he did attend the summit. So this time, his absence is really noteworthy. And it's a strong political message given that the G20 is considered the world's premier economic forum. And the fact that China is the world's second largest economy and the topmost leader of that economic power, is not present at the premier economic forum is significant. So that is how one should read it. And it has messages, obviously, for India. And because of the relationship, the way it is strained and it is deteriorated in the last 3.5 years since the border standoff started. So it is a clear signal to India about the relationship being abnormal and that it's not business as usual.
Right, and it has now been 3 years since the standoff started, so this, one imagines, is another signal that things will remain strained for some time. But the other thing to keep in mind is that this has happened while the Russia-Ukraine war is going on. And we understand that China has been sympathetic towards Russia. So does Xi Jinping not coming to Delhi align with that?
Well, China has clearly been backing Russia through the conflict. You know, if you remember in February 2022, when just before the war started, Xi Jinping and President Putin had met at that point of time, and they had declared what was called the no limits friendship between the two countries. After that, once the Russian invasion of Ukraine started on 24th of February 2022, China has sided with Russia at the UN Security Council, at all the fora. In fact, at the G20 meetings, China and Russia have moved in lockstep. They have been in sync in opposing the G7's proposal to condemn Russian aggression or have a harsh language against Russia. China has stood up for its friend and partner, Russia. So this completely is a backing of Russia by China in the last. And that is the trend lines. That trend line continues. And the fact that both President Putin and Chinese President Xi Jinping will be absent, it just shows how hardening of stance, hardening of battle lines has happened in the last few months. And that's a reflection of this polarized, divided G20 that we see right now.
And Shubhajit, although China has sided with Russia in this regard, it still depends a lot on Europe and the Western countries for trade. And considering that one of the main concerns of this summit is international financial stability, is China putting that at risk by not attending it?
That's a great question. In fact, that is something one has to analyze that, by skipping the G20 summit, what is the signal to G20 that Xi Jinping is sending? So technically, he's sending the Chinese premier, who is lower than him in hierarchy in terms of power in the Chinese system or in the establishment. He's way above him. And Li Xiang, who is the Chinese premier, will attend. But there is a saying in diplomacy that if you're not at the table, then you are on the menu. So by distancing himself from the G20 summit, is he sort of abdicating the role to shape the rules of the world? Or is he willing to give up that power, that leverage that China has? Or is he completely dissociating from the rules of the world, where the rules of the world don't probably matter to China? And whatever others decide, it doesn't have to follow it, or it doesn't have to adhere to it. So these are the mixed signals that one is getting from China. And especially because, just about a few weeks ago, when the BRICS countries met in Johannesburg, where China, Russia, all are part, and India as well, there the BRICS declaration said in as many words that the G20 is the premier economic forum and they support the G20 process. So just few weeks after that, to walk away from G20 summit, I mean, that just shows the dissonance between the stand that was taken in BRICS declaration in August and right now by China.
And Shubhajit, has New Delhi at all reacted to Xi Jinping not coming to the summit?
So not officially, but officials have told us that how this particular absence doesn't reflect on India. It does not reflect on how the arrangements are being made. Or they've also said that, there have been 16 physical summits of the G20. And out of these 16 physical summits, except the first three in 2008 and 2009, there has not been a single occasion from 2010 onwards till now that where every country has attended at the heads of state and heads of government level. So they have cited these figures to say that at this time when leaders are busy with their commitments, it's in today's world with so many demands on the leaders' time, it's not always possible for every leader to attend every summit. That's the official line of the Indian government has been, although they have not come out on record on this, and they've downplayed Xi's absence. But the fact of the matter is, absence does take away Xi from the summit, and it also is perceived as a symptom of the gulf in bilateral ties. In fact, it comes amid a chill between the host and the guest nation. The chill may just have dropped a few points further.
And next we talk about cricket and the Olympics. The Los Angeles Olympics is still more than 4 years away. But next month, over 100 members of the IOC, the International Olympics Committee, will meet in Mumbai to decide which new sports should be included in the world's biggest sporting event. And turns out that cricket is in the running for it. To find out what it would mean for cricket to be included in the Olympics, we are now joined by Indian Express's Mihir Vasavda. Mihir, what would you say are some of the most popular sports that are not part of the Olympics right now?
Cricket. I think that's the only sport which isn't a part of the Olympics right now. And I mean, it depends how you define popular. But say if you look at by numbers itself, the mass popularity, football is in the Olympics, basketball is in the Olympics. From an India point of view, there is hockey at the Olympics, baseball is there, golf is there, tennis is there. So all your major sports, they are at the Olympics. But then there are some which are popular, say for example, like a squash, but not that popular really. They're still not there. But when we talk about, popularity, like we know popularity about cricket in India, there is no other sport I can think of which isn't at the Olympics right now.
And what is the reason for this? What is the reason that cricket has not been included in the Olympic cycle?
I mean, the reason why cricket actually has not been in the Olympics or it's been talked about only now, it's from both sides. So the International Cricket Council, which is like the world governing body for cricket, it was largely indifferent to the Olympics. They were happy perhaps being just the small Commonwealth sport that cricket is. And they never really had ambitions to grow beyond that. Until recently, when in the bid to stay relevant in the changing global sports landscape, cricket has had to evolve with, and of course, the most defining aspect has been the IPL and T20 cricket, because that just showed that you can have a shorter version of cricket at the Olympics. Now, the problem with Olympics always has been that it's in a 2-week cycle. There is generally a cap on the number of players. Cricket is a long sport. Like before T20, there was 50 overs and that took 1 day to complete an entire match. So it was practically impossible to fit entire cricket tournament in the 2 weeks of the Olympics. So that's one side of the story. From the International Olympic Committee's side, the issue really was that the process to add a sport into the Olympic program was actually very rigid. So if you had to, say, add cricket, then you really had to drop another sport. But that has changed in the last decade or a little more than that, because what's essentially happened is there is this flexibility given to host countries where they can add sports of their choice. So the 28-29 core disciplines of the Olympics remain, and then the host nation is given the discretion, given the freedom to propose sports of their choice. And that is why cricket is being looked at as an Olympic entrant for 2028 Olympics.
Right, and we are of course talking about cricket right now because over 100 members of the IOC will be meeting next month to decide whether cricket, along with some other sports, should be included in the Olympics. So talk about that a bit, and what are the chances that this will actually end up happening for cricket?
On Friday, that is September 8, the Executive Committee of the International Olympic Committee will meet, and they are likely to finalize the sports program for the Los Angeles Olympics in 2028. Now, the Executive Board of the IOC is the most powerful decision-making body. Once they decide something, so what is expected to happen is they'll just kind of settle down on the sports program for the Olympics. The executive committee will give its seal of approval, and then it will be presented in front of the IOC session. Now, IOC session is an entire gathering of all the members of the International Olympic Committee. So there are 101 members of the IOC. They'll gather and they have to then formally approve what the executive board decides. So it's a 2-step process, but if the first step is passed, then the second step, experts say, is just a mere formality.
And Mihir, what would it mean for cricket to be included in the Olympics? And also, what would it mean for countries like India, for example, that are heavily invested in the sport?
I mean, for a country like India, it is a great way to get invested into the Olympics. I mean, Olympics does not seem to have a mass appeal in India right now, and that is reflected, say, for example, in the broadcast rights amount. I mean, apparently, it's in the range of $31 million for the Paris Olympics cycle, which isn't a lot when we compare to, say, a cricket tournament. IPL, the entire cycle for right now is $6 billion worth. So there is a huge interest gap, and it reflects in the sports popularity as well. Olympic disciplines are not as popular as cricket. So for the IOC, if they get cricket into the Olympics, it means they are tapping into the vast South Asian base, not just India. We're talking about Bangladesh, we're talking about Sri Lanka, Pakistan. These are the countries which form a major chunk of population which isn't invested in the Olympics right now. So that's one thing. For cricket, it's a big win because the moment you are in the Olympics, it means that your sport will spread. Countries which are generally not investing into cricket, they'll be incentivized to spend more, form a team, send a team to the Olympics. The hope, whether it happens, or not, it's a different thing, but certainly that's the hope that more countries start to play, your pool gets bigger, and the sport gets bigger in a way too.
And in India, cricket remains hugely popular. And sitting here, it might seem that it is one of the most popular sports in the world. But how popular is cricket on a global scale, and does it really need the Olympic push?
It's a question that is sure to generate quite a lot of debate. I personally feel that cricket is going through an existential crisis for the fact that beyond the 3-4 nations that we know, India, Pakistan, Australia, and England to a certain extent, New Zealand's always there. So beyond these 4-5 nations, the sport's really struggling for survival. The investments are coming down. The share of revenue from the International Cricket Council is reducing year by year, cycle by cycle. And beyond India, there isn't a market where the sport has actually seen massive growth in the last 10 years. You look at Australia and you see the way women's football has exploded there. Although cricket will be secure in its position over there, but we haven't really seen cricket really breach newer boundaries as, say, football has done or tennis has done. And that's different. Cricket, of course, remains popular and you have 1.5 billion people really following the sport every day. So in terms of numbers, cricket will always be sorted. But in terms of the number of countries that are playing and engaging with the sport, that's a challenge right now.
And Mihir, we've been talking about cricket, but what are some of the other sports that are in the running to be included?
Some really interesting ones. So there is karate, which featured at the Tokyo Olympics and is trying once again. There's kickboxing, there's baseball and softball. There is lacrosse. There is breakdancing, which is again a very youth-oriented sport that's trying to make its way into mainstream. There's motorsport, but what form of motorsport is something we'll know perhaps closer to the date, if at all there is a presentation on that. There's a sport called flag football, which is supposed to be really, really popular in the US. Not perhaps as popular in our part of the world. And then there's squash. Squash is a sport that's been trying to get into the Olympics for a very long time. It's not been successful, so it's making another attempt. But we've spoken to experts, who are familiar with the workings of the IOC, and they're saying that cricket is the front runner for the main reason that in LA, it gives them the space to tap into the South Asian population and get them involved in the Olympics. And also because of the current investment that's happening in the American cricket industry. You've got Major League Cricket where companies like Alphabet and Microsoft have been major players. A cricket stadium is being built in LA right now, which is funded by the KKR. Shah Rukh Khan owned KKR. And beyond LA 2028, the next Olympics after that in 2032, they are in Australia, which is another cricket mad nation. And we shouldn't forget that for the year 2036, India is considering a bid to host those games. We're still far off in that it's still nascent stages over there. But cricket's inclusion at this point would mean that it can stay in 2 back-to-back Olympic cycles and then potentially also get a shot in the 2036 Olympics too.
And in the end, we talk about an initiative that has changed the lives of children in a village in the Pune district. This is the Sandavgarh village, located in the hilly areas near the Western Ghats.
So, Sandavgarh is a village which is situated in Vella Taluka of Pune district, and there are 7 such talukas which lie on the western parts of the district, which are very mountainous.
That's Indian Express's Atikh Rashid.
And these villages have also seen very high out-migration from anyways very thinly populated regions. So you have villages which have say 60% or 50%, 70% houses which are locked, and with families having migrated to Pune city or other areas to earn a living. So very few people have stayed back. Most of these are elderly people, and those people who have stayed back, they face a lot of issues which may range from, say, access to telecommunication, to education, to health.
He says only about 20 nomadic families from the Katkari tribe reside there now. And they're the ones who have to struggle for basic facilities on a day-to-day basis. For example, the nearest school for children in the village is 5 kilometers away. And it's a struggle to get to because there is no public transportation available there.
And hence these kids who are studying in class 1 to class 5, they had to walk the closest school, which was in Saif Khurd, about 5 kilometers from their homes. So we were told by the parents that these students were extremely reluctant to go to school, especially in the monsoons, because the roads become very difficult. So the students were becoming very irregular to the school, and they were going to school, say, once or twice a week. And also, since these are very poor families, very low literacy, so a lot of these kids, they prefer to go fishing or catching crabs or foraging through forest with their parents to earn some money rather than, going to school. So those issues the families were facing in sending their kids to school.
He says that this issue was not just limited to the Sandavgarh village. 7 other talukas in the same area were facing similar problems.
So newspapers like us have been reporting about this, that these hilly talukas, these villages, because of large out-migration, have very few families staying there, hence very few kids. And hence these schools, even when they are functioning near the families, very close to the villages and all, even then they have very few students. So for example, there are 374 schools in Pune district which have less than 10 students. There are 165 which have less than 5, and there are about 21 which have just 1 student. So all those issues were known to the Zilla Parishad authorities and the education department. And in 2021, they decided to start an experimental cluster school in Vella Taluka, in a village called Panshet, which is centrally located to some of these villages where the issue was most acute. And that was basically serving kids which are staying in a 10-kilometer radius of that school.
And here it is important to note that this had never been done in Maharashtra before. Atikh says the district administration brought together students from 16 schools in the area and consolidated them into this cluster school. They also added improved facilities, additional teachers, classroom, computers, and a reading room. He says that with this larger school, students had the opportunity to engage in peer learning and competitions, which they were not experiencing in the schools near their village.
When there are just 5 or 4 students, there is very little competition happening. So they want them to be in a class of 20, a class of 30, a class of 50, where there will be peer learning and competition. And another reason that has been cited is that for kids coming from tribal backgrounds or weaker communities, which can be discriminated against in a village setting, if they go to a larger school, there is some degree of anonymity, caste anonymity comes in, where there will be less of that discrimination happening because, kids or parents wouldn't know by face who belongs to which caste.
However, he says that despite its advantages, some parents were concerned about the fact that this school was quite far away from their homes.
Because, see, the schools which are located near the village or within the village, they are not going to be shut down because the government doesn't have a policy to shut down schools. So those schools would run. So some parents, they want their kids to remain in those schools because they can keep a close watch in what's happening there, because it's within the village or very close to the village. And the school like the Panshet school would be, say, 5 kilometers or 10 kilometers away from them. So that's one concern which some parents have.
So to convince these parents to send their children to the cluster school, the school administration introduced a bus that travels to all the nearby villages and picks up the students. And on the 14th of August, for the first time, this school bus went to the Sandavgarh village to pick up the children for school.
The school bus has had a great positive impact. We spoke to the kids and we spoke to the parents who are extremely happy about the school bus coming to them. And I personally have seen faces of the kids and faces of the parents when they see their kids seated in the bus and studying in the school. So we can say that it is, 1, a novelty, and 2, it is government coming to them. So they are feeling quite happy about it. So what one mother told me that the kids wake up very early, 6 a.m. and 6:30 a.m. when it's still dark in that part of the village. And they start getting ready for school. And even when other people in the village haven't even woken up. So there is a lot of enthusiasm among kids because the school bus gives them a fun ride. They perhaps is also liking the bigger school. They are finding new friends among bigger classrooms. So yeah, there is quite a bit of enthusiasm among kids.
And with growing enthusiasm, he says that the students' academic performances have also significantly improved, thanks to the regular transportation provided by the bus.
The teachers at the Panshet Cluster School, they told us that one is that these students from Katkari community, they were lagging in some elementary aspects of education like numbers, tables, and they didn't know, say, words and all. So that they are working on. But most importantly, they say that these students are very good at sports and athletics, and they are planning to promote them in that direction as well. And they also say that there has been considerable improvement in them since they have come. So there are students from class 1 to class 4 among these 12 students who have come from Katkari hamlet of Sandavgarh. So most of these are from class 3 and class 4. There are a few who study in class 1. And all of the class teachers of those classes have said that there has been considerable improvement since they have come to the cluster school. So because it is an experiment, so we are keeping a close watch on it, how it progresses. But the government authorities, the Zilla Parishad and the Education Department of Maharashtra, they're also keeping a close watch on the cluster school and how that works out. If it turns out to be a success, it's quite likely that the Education Department and Zilla Parishads of Pune and even other districts in Maharashtra which is facing similar issues, they might expand on the project and start similar cluster schools in remote areas.
You were listening to Three Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was written and produced by me, Shashank Bhargava, and was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it, share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.